And I bet our next guest has a thought before we talk college football with him about the state of the Florida basketball program. Is it time to make a change on Mike White or not?
Well, he is Andy Staples, covers college football for The Athletic, but makes his home in the Sunshine State. He's on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. What's up, Andy? How are you?
How you doing, guys?
Doing great. Thanks a lot. Mike White is catching some heat down in your neck of the woods, I would have to imagine.
Oh, yeah. But, I mean, he's been catching heat pretty much every year. And, you know, I do wonder at what point they decide they've had enough of the whining, because even when they were making the tournament frequently, he may have had an Elite Eight run a few years ago. Nobody's ever been particularly enamored of the style of play. This team plays very hard defense, but when their shots don't fall, it's not pretty. They don't create a lot of offense. So, you know, I'll be curious to see what the outcome is, because the last night felt like, you know, because they're hovering on that last 4 in, first 4 out area of the bubble. But last night was a game that they kind of needed to win. And they've got Auburn coming in Saturday. They have another game at Kentucky. I don't think they're going to win that one. But they've got a couple games where they can say, hey, look, we can beat tournament teams and really good tournament teams. But nothing they've done gives you the confidence they're going to be able to do that.
Sticking with Florida, but shifting to football, interesting question before you came on. First-year coaches next year, who do you think ultimately has more success next 5 years? Brent Venables in Norman or Billy Napier in Gainesville?
Ooh, that's a good question. You know, I think the infrastructure in Norman might be a little ahead of where it is in Gainesville, because they've been winning. They sort of know what they're doing now. I realize they're changing conferences, and that's going to change things a bit. But I actually think Brent Venables is a good choice to recruit them into the SEC, because this is a guy who's been recruiting against all the elite SEC schools at Clemson. So he understands how to sell and really kind of how to sell as the outsider, because, you know, in with Oklahoma, he's going to be going in and going up against Texas A&M and LSU and Alabama and recruiting. And people are going to say, well, what do you know about this? And he can say, well, I recruited guys to win national titles against those teams. So I think I can probably do it here too. So I think it's a good way to sell. With Billy Napier, we don't know, but we do know he understands what he needs to do. You look at the staffing they've done, some of the titles for these people, I have no idea what they do, but it's the same thing in Alabama. It's just Alabama's not, they don't name their titles as creatively, I think, but they understand that they need a pretty solid infrastructure, that recruiting is the most important thing. Talent acquisition is the biggest part of the deal. And I think that's something that was not the case in the previous administration. So that was, you know, what Florida needs is someone who can recruit like Will Muschamp and coach on the field like Dan Mullen. And then they got something going, and they're hoping that's Billy Napier. We'll have to see. I mean, what he did at Louisiana was very impressive, because that was a program that was not very consistent. He came in, they immediately became consistent. And I think that's a pretty good sign.
It's easy, Andy, with Mario or Kirby or all these coaches to tie them back to Nick Saban. But do you feel like Billy has his own touch of the process, his own feeling of doing a program where it's not trying to duplicate what's in Tuscaloosa? Or do you feel like he's trying to do a lot of things they did in Tuscaloosa?
I think he's picking what worked. And he's definitely had a different journey than the average Nick Saban assistant. This isn't like Kirby being with Nick Saban forever, or you know, let's go the other direction, Jeremy Pruitt being with Nick Saban forever. Billy Napier was part of the Clemson staff. You know, he and Dabo were together. They were very tight, you know, kind of came up together. He was Dabo's offensive coordinator when Dabo got the interim head coaching job, and then when he became the full-time head coach. And Dabo will tell you one of the hardest things he's had to do in the profession is fire Billy Napier. And after Billy Napier got fired, he goes and does the analyst thing at Alabama. And Billy said he learned more that year than just about any other year of his coaching career. But yeah, if you look, his time with Nick Saban, you know, inside the Alabama machine is actually fairly short in the grand scheme of things. He's picked up a lot of stuff. But the thing I always wonder with the former Saban assistants or former whoever assistants is, did they pick up the right things? Did they notice what worked and why it worked? Because like Jeremy Pruitt, I think you can tell from his tenure as Tennessee's head coach, he wasn't paying attention at all to what was actually working. Like, he got to Tennessee and is like, I know what we're going to do. We're going to build 2012 Alabama, but with worse players. That'll win a game. That'll win games. Like, he wasn't paying attention at all. Kirby Smart clearly was paying attention and built it step by step, almost exactly the way Nick Saban had. And lo and behold, he's sitting there holding the trophy at the end of this year.
Andy Staples is with us. You can follow him on Twitter at Andy_Staples. Read him in The Athletic. Great time to subscribe there. Hear him on SiriusXM. And The Andy Staples Show is his podcast, available wherever you get us, wherever you get your podcast. The Andy Staples Show, great college football and food podcast as well. He's with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. Your colleague David Ubben did an article about the NIL deal there in Knoxville. I know Nick Saban said Bryce Young made close to $1 million. I had a difficult time believing that. Am I to believe?
I still have a difficult time believing that.
Well, I've got a more difficult time believing Hendon Hooker does, which is, and I'm not doubting David's.
But that's not what David wrote.
Okay, well, why did I
David
see
never
it
wrote
then?
that Hendon Hooker was making $1 million.
Why did everybody
read
say
the
that?
quote? The guy, because people can't read, apparently. Reading comprehension is a lost art. What they were saying is, if you are a great, like, Peyton Manning type quarterback at Tennessee, the possibilities for a 7-figure payout are there. Is Hendon Hooker doing that? No, he's not doing that. If Hendon Hooker takes them into an SEC title, is he going to make a bunch of money this year? Yes, he is. But, that's going to be fairly difficult for him to do. But yes, this is happening. These collectives are happening. $10 million a year is kind of what a lot of folks in the SEC and Big Ten programs that aspire to win big conference titles. That's what they're looking at raising, hopefully, as sort of a payroll, for lack of a better term. And you can say, oh, that's a lot of money. Well, okay. It'll buy you 1 year of a kind of good veteran right tackle in the NFL, if you want to put that in perspective.
Yeah, right.
Or if you want to do it in a different perspective, an NFL team has to pay, because the CBA has to pay close to 50% of its football-related revenue to its players. $10 million for a program like Tennessee or Alabama or Florida, you're talking about 8% of the total revenue. So it's not really apples to apples when you look at that. And it's kind of a bargain, because if that's going to get you a better team, you're going to get rewarded on the back end of that. So I'll be interested to see how those numbers change, because I'm sure they're going to go up, and then I'm sure they're going to find a level, because they can't go up forever. Though we said the same thing with coaching salaries, and they haven't really stopped yet. But no, at some point the market will find its level. I think it's really interesting to watch this market, because the restraints got taken off all at once. The Band-Aid got ripped off, and it's sort of just blindly running around trying to find where its level is, and we don't know where it is. We don't. I think my theory is that money that goes up front to freshmen who haven't done anything yet is going to drop as we go forward, because people realize what a crapshoot that investment is. There are going to be recruits that people feel like are just, can't miss type players. Mostly on the line of scrimmage would be my guess. And those people are going to be worth every penny. But for the most part, with especially quarterbacks, like, you don't know, that Quinn Ewers, the kid from Texas,
right?
He goes to Ohio State last year, gets a bunch of NIL deals. He's already transferred to Texas, because he ain't beating out CJ Stroud, and he knows it. So, like, that's the sort of thing. If you made a deal with him as an Ohio State centric entity, well, you made a bad deal. So are you going to be so quick to make another deal? You got to make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. Now, CJ Stroud, on the other hand, the starting quarterback at Ohio State, if I'm somebody there, I'm keeping that dude happy, because he's great. So I think I got another year with him. What if he decides, well, I think Bryce Young's going to be the number one pick in the draft, and I want to be the number one pick in the draft. And if I'm making good money, I might stay at Ohio State another year. Give him some more. That's when you've got somebody you know is a sure thing that's going to be there for another year or so. That's where I think you really want to pile in and take advantage. So I think what I'll be interested. We'll see some players who were, under recruited guys or maybe diamonds in the rough, 3-star type guys who blow up as freshmen. What kind of deals do they get? Because my guess is that comes surging in as soon as they prove themselves on the field.
You touched on coaching salaries, and we know that Kirby Smart's getting this extension, this raise. We haven't seen the numbers. Do you think ultimately he will be the highest paid coach in college football? And what do you think that number is per year?
Oh, I don't know. Does he care if he's the highest paid coach in college football? Is it? I know some of these guys, it matters, not necessarily the dollar amount, but just that they make more than some other guy. But yeah, I would think it's in the 9 to 10 range, and depending on how the bonuses work out, maybe more in some years. I mean, is it worth it? He brought the national title that you needed. I did a thing when Nick Saban got his extension last year about what he's worth to the University of Alabama. And if you look at the amount of out-of-state applications they've gotten since he became the football coach there, and they're basically the biggest billboard for the university. Alabama's making a ton more money. Alabama's making in the hundreds of millions more per year because Nick Saban works there. So whatever they're paying him isn't enough. And I've had this discussion with people at Alabama. We're just kind of a bar type discussion. Like, all right, what's he really worth? Like, if you had to pay him what he was actually worth, what would it be? And some of them are like, 25, 30 million.
Yeah.
Well,
just without even blinking.
The impact
and he'd be worth it.
Yeah, the impact on this state's economy. I'm not just talking Alabama or Tuscaloosa, the whole state.
Shoot, on our salaries. Our salaries have gone up because of Nick Saban.
There is no doubt about that, Andy. I mean, but to just the construction industry in Tuscaloosa, all the buildings they have built on that campus because of what you're just talking about is incredible.
Yeah. I mean, because an out-of-state student pays 3 times as much as an in-state student.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's real money. It's coming from somewhere, and it's actually coming from somewhere else into the state's economy. So that's the thing. But it's interesting to me because there's only a few coaches like that who are actually worth that. And I think that's where athletic directors can get played by agents, because it's hard sometimes because there's so much emotion tied up in this to figure out whether you've got one of those truly special people or whether you got somebody who's basically replacement level. Because if there's somebody who's replacement level and they're trying to hold you over a barrel and get a big raise, you should just tell them to go, because you can find somebody to do what they do. Like if you're sitting there at 8-4 every year and that coach can't get you any higher, and they're saying, well, if I leave, you might get somebody who goes 5-7. Yeah, but we might get somebody who goes 10-2. So if you want to raise, you can pound sand. That's what they should say, but it is not often what they do say.
There are some mailbag columns out there that are space fillers. I've always enjoyed yours at The Athletic. I can't remember if this was a mailbag item or an actual column, but you broke down some numbers about assistant coach hires or group of 5 hires.
Yeah.
What did you learn from crunching those numbers if you were an AD about making a hire?
That was last week's mailbag, and it was a really great question. What the person asked me was, if you're at a Power 5 school and you're in need of a coach, should you hire the hot Group of 5 head coach or the hot Power 5 assistant? And so I broke it down over the last 15 years of Power 5 head coaching hires. And I think there were 153 different hires, and just did the winning percentage of the coaches and the tenure of the coaches just to see who wound up doing better. And it actually depends on your circumstances, because if you fired your coach, the hot Group of 5 coach, the head coach, actually tends to do better. If you had your coach leave because they got a better job or they retired, then the assistant tends to do better. And now, one thing that kind of skews those numbers a lot, because the assistants did better in general. But then I said, okay, well, what if I take out the assistants who replaced someone who left because they either got a better job or retired? Because that takes out Ryan Day, that takes out Lincoln Riley, that takes out Mike Gundy, some very, very successful coaches. And you realize, oh, okay, so it's maybe not as big of a thing, as big of a difference. But there was another group that was actually better overall than the hot Power 5 assistants and the hot Group of 5 head coaches, and that was the former Power 5 head coaches. And so we're talking about hires like Texas A&M hiring Jimbo Fisher, like Ohio State hiring Urban Meyer, like South Carolina hiring Steve Spurrier in 2005. And you've got to be careful here, because you don't want to be the recycler. You don't want to just take somebody just because they've been a Power 5 head coach, because that gets you Charlie Weiss at Kansas. But you gotta be careful there. But there is a value in knowing what you don't know and being prepared for some of these things that are going to come along. And this is what I keep telling people about LSU. You know, you can make fun of Brian Kelly's fake Southern accent all you want. The job at Notre Dame is massive. What you have to deal with as the Notre Dame head coach is on the level of anything you have to deal with as any head coach anywhere in America. The job at LSU, while the ceiling may be higher because you can recruit from a deeper pool, I'm not sure it's more difficult than the job at Notre Dame. I think they're probably about equally difficult. Notre Dame might actually even be harder. And so when people are, I don't know if Brian Kelly's, I think Brian Kelly's going to do just fine, because we've seen evidence over the years of him taking a program to its ceiling at that level. I realize Notre Dame's an independent, but they play what amounts to a Power 5 schedule, and he's done great. So it does kind of give credence to why you should take the big swing like LSU did, like USC did.
This is a complimentary observation, but since the last time we had you on, you look like you've lost a shit ton of weight.
That is the exact amount.
I don't know how you've
when
done
I step
it
on the scale.
But I mean, what are you doing? Because I mean, you really look like you've lost like 60, 70 pounds.
So since 2020, so since right before the pandemic started, when I started saying I need to get serious about this, I have lost 60 pounds.
Wow.
And it started, first phase was just doing intermittent fasting, and I lost like 40 pounds doing that. And that happened pretty quickly. But then I stopped. I was still doing the intermittent fasting, which is kind of eating what I wanted. And I started to gain weight again. And I got back up. I was at 250. I was 280 in 2020. I'm 220 now. I was at 256 last September. My wife and I decided, all right, we're going to get serious about this. We're going to start counting calories. We both downloaded the apps on our phone and said, okay, here's our target weight. Here's how much we want to lose per week. And it just tells you, okay, this is how many calories you're allowed to eat today. And you plug it all in. And I've made sure I stay, you're in the green if you're below the number of calories. If you burn more than you've consumed, you're in the green at the end of the day. You're in the red if you've consumed more than you burn. I make sure I'm in the green at least weekly, always monthly, sometimes daily. You're in the red. Like we had Valentine's, date night, cheat dinner the other night. I was way in the red that night, but you gotta, if you stack a bunch of good days, like if you stack 6 good days and have one bad day in a week, you're going to come out fine. And it's good. I'm not miserable. The difference between this, because I've had some diets where I've lost 40, 50 pounds before, but I put it all back on, and I'm hoping I don't do it this time. I can't guarantee that I won't, but I'm not looking at this like, oh, if I hit this weight, I'm going to stop doing this, start eating everything I want. I'm going to try to live like this for the rest of my life. And I think I'll be able to manage it better that way, because it's interesting. Originally, my target weight was 225. And when I got to 225, I'm like, I still got some fat on me. Like, why should I stop doing this? And so I just kept on doing it. Now I'm down to 220. I reset the target weight to 215. I don't know if that's where it's going to wind up. My body will kind of find its level, like the NIL market. It'll find its level eventually. But no, it's been good. I feel great, and it's not like I never eat anything good. Like I am smoking a pork butt this weekend. I'm going to enjoy the heck out of that.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, because you're sort of known for your love of food. You're a foodie, and all of us sports guys look at you as our writer who's a foodie. That's got to be rough for you.
No, it's not, because I still get to go do that. I mean, so I was in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. I went over to Meat Boss and had 2 massive sandwiches, but that was all I ate that day. And it's just, you got to discipline yourself that when you're going to have a meal like that, you have to be a little bit careful the rest of the day. And it was fine. I really enjoyed it. Those were fantastic sandwiches. And if I'm around a good barbecue place, I'm going and I'm eating, and I'm not worrying about how many calories I eat. I'll put it all into the app. I'll log it all, but I'm not going to feel bad about it, because I'm just going to make sure I make decent choices in the days surrounding it, and I'll be all right.
Hey, good for you, man. That's great.
Yep.
You can follow Andy on Twitter at Andy_Staples. As he says there, he's a regional personality in the Piggly Wiggly footprint. We've got a video he might find interesting. Read him at The Athletic, Sirius College, XM, and the Andy Staples Show, wherever you get your podcast. Andy, thank you very much for the time.
My pleasure.
All right, buddy. Take care. Andy with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline.